Kent, the 5th of May, 1857. The silver bent before anyone at Linden Grange understood that the house itself had already begun to give way. Winifred Armitage felt the stem fold, beneath the weight of a single preserved pair, not with the stubborn resistance of older sterling, but with the soft, shameful surrender of inferior metal. The spoon sagged sideways in her gloved hand. A thin ripple of surprise passed around the supper table, followed by the sharper sound of Lady Daphne Deverill drawing breath. "What have you done?" she asked. The words carried farther than they needed to, beneath the painted ceiling and candle-lit portraits of 6 dead dukes of Alresford. Winifred did not answer at once. She lowered the pair back into its crystal dish and examined the spoon without twisting it further. The bowl was bright enough, too bright perhaps. The pattern imitated the Deverill berry service with admirable confidence, but the stem had been filed thin beneath the decoration. The mark near the handle looked almost correct from a distance. Almost. "Miss Armitage?" Lady Daphne pressed. "I asked what you've done." Winifred looked up. Lady Daphne sat at the right hand of her nephew, the present Duke of Alresford, with the composure of a woman who had spent 20 years behaving as though every chair in Linden Grange had been placed for her convenience. At 55, she remained handsome, pearl-pale, and exact. She had introduced Winifred before supper as a tradesman's daughter with a neat hand, though the Duke had engaged her for 1 week to prepare an illustrated catalogue of the family plate for a county subscription exhibition. "I lifted the pair," Winifred said, "nothing more." A gentleman near the end of the table smiled into his wine. Lady Daphne heard him and grew colder. "Old silver does not bend because a woman lifts fruit with it." "No," Winifred replied. "It does not." The silence that followed was small but complete. Across the table, Clement Deverill, 8th Duke of Alresford, set down his glass. Until that moment, he had appeared only mildly interested in the discussion of rococo handles, provincial makers, and whether the exhibition should include the chapel silver. He was 39, broad-shouldered, without military stiffness, and possessed of the sort of face society called severe, when it did not know what else to call a man who listened more than he performed. His dark coat was cut with quiet perfection. His expression was not. Something alert had entered it. "That sounded dangerously like agreement, Miss Armitage," he said. "My aunt prefers surrender." Lady Daphne's fan stopped. "Clement, I'm only trying to understand which offence occurred first, the damaged spoon or the accurate answer." A few guests lowered their eyes. Winifred did not smile, though the impulse came unexpectedly. The Duke held out his hand, then paused before reaching across the table. "May I?" The question unsettled her more than a command would have done. She turned the spoon so he could take the thicker portion of the handle without altering the bend. His fingers closed over it only after hers had released it. He weighed it in his palm. The gesture was casual. His attention was not. "Light," he said. "Yes, Your Grace. How light? I cannot tell without scales. Enough that the difference should be measurable." Lady Daphne gave a short laugh. "This is absurd. She has damaged a spoon and now proposes to weigh the evidence of her own clumsiness." Winifred kept her gaze on the Duke. "The surface is plated. The metal beneath is not sterling. The stem has been filed too thin, probably to carry the copied pattern without increasing the weight. The mark has been worked to resemble an earlier date, but the spacing is wrong." The gentleman who had smiled now leaned forward. "You can see all that from there. I can see enough not to pretend certainty about the rest." The Duke turned the spoon toward the candles. Near the handle, the false mark caught a shallow line of light. And if we polish this vigorously, I suppose it will become honest. It may become brighter. Winifred met his eyes. That isn't the same thing. For the first time, his expression shifted, not into warmth, into recognition. It was the look of a man who had expected competence and discovered principle. Lady Daphne pushed back her chair a fraction. The Deverill service was made in 1822. It has been used by this family for 35 years without some hired draftswoman declaring it counterfeit over dessert. One piece has declared itself, Clement said. He laid the bent spoon upon the clean fold of his napkin. Miss Armitage merely translated. You cannot mean to indulge this spectacle. I mean to discover why an object recorded as sterling has folded under a pear. His voice remained quiet. The quiet made every servant along the wall more attentive. No one leaves the dining room with plate. No tray returns to the service passage until each item is counted where it stands. Lady Daphne stared at him. Before our guests have already watched the silver bend. Counting it will not make the evening less private. The estate solicitor, who had been seated 2 places below the Duke for discussion of exhibition subscriptions, rose at once. Clement indicated the napkin. Take that in full view of the table. Wrap it. Lock it in your dispatch box tonight. It will be formally sealed when the plate room is opened in the morning. The solicitor obeyed. He folded the linen around the spoon without touching the metal, placed the packet in a small leather dispatch box, and turned the key before returning it to his coat pocket. Winifred watched the transfer from beginning to end. Clement noticed. You approve? He asked. I approve of knowing where it is. A radical preference. Only in houses where objects travel without explanation. Lady Daphne's face lost a little colour. The change was slight, but Winifred saw it. So did Clement. His gaze moved from his aunt to the silver dishes, salvers, candlesticks, and serving pieces distributed along the table. The room's splendour altered under that look. What had seemed abundant now appeared vulnerable. Every shining surface carried a question. Your Grace, Lady Daphne said. This can be handled discreetly tomorrow. It will be handled thoroughly tomorrow. He turned to the butler. The plate room is to be locked when this service is returned. You and the housekeeper will each retain your usual key. Neither key is to be used without the other present. Yes, Your Grace. The repair files, transport books, and plate registers are to be collected tonight and placed in the estate office. The carriage house, trunks used for London transfers, are to be secured where they stand. Every cabinet containing silver, whether in a family room, guest chamber, chapel vestry, or servant's cupboard, is to remain locked until listed. A footman near the sideboard shifted his weight. Lady Daphne heard the faint movement. Must the whole household be treated as suspect because Miss Armitage cannot control her hands? Winifred felt the old instinct to become smaller. It had preserved her through years of drawing rooms where knowledge was welcome only when delivered without ownership. She let the instinct pass. My hands did not weaken the metal, Lady Daphne. Your father's workshop failed, did it not? The cruelty was polished enough to resemble conversation. Several guests looked down. Winifred's pulse struck once against her throat, but her voice remained level. My father's workshop closed after losing the confidence of respectable clients. Daphne. Clement spoke her name without raising his voice. It was enough. She turned toward him, offended less by the warning than by the fact that he had given it publicly. He rested one hand beside his untouched glass. Miss Armitage was engaged because she knows what this family does not. If that embarrasses us, we may choose to become less ignorant. We will not choose to make her smaller. The words reached places in Winifred that praise could not have touched. Praise was often a coin offered by people who expected gratitude in return. This was different. It was a boundary drawn where everyone could see it. Lady Daphne opened her fan. And what precisely do you expect her to do? Clement looked again at the locked dispatch box beneath the solicitor's hand. Then he surveyed the long table, the bright service, and the ancestral portraits watching from above, as if rank itself had been summoned to account. At dawn, Miss Armitage, we count the house. At 6 o'clock the next morning, the plate room of Linden Grange had the air of a chapel before judgment. The shutters were still closed against the pale Kent light, and the single lamp on the central table threw a narrow glow over locked cupboards, iron-bound chests, and the blank leather backs of ledgers that had not been opened in years. Winifred stood beside the housekeeper, her gloves buttoned, her notebook closed beneath one hand. The butler waited near the door with his ring of keys. The estate solicitor arrived last, carrying the same leather dispatch box he had locked in the dining room the previous evening. No one spoke until Clement Deverill entered. He wore a dark morning coat without ornament, as though the splendor of the house had forfeited the right to decorate him. "Before we begin," he said, "we establish what has moved and what has not." The solicitor placed the dispatch box upon the table. "It has remained in my possession since supper, Your Grace. The key has remained on my person." He unlocked it in full view of them and removed the folded linen packet. The bent spoon lay exactly as Winifred had last seen it. The stem collapsed sideways beneath the copied pattern. The solicitor transferred it, without touching the metal, into a shallow, felt-lined evidence box, prepared by the housekeeper. Winifred watched the linen lift, watched the spoon settle, watched the lid close. Red wax received the solicitor's seal across the fastening. Clement noticed her attention. "You may record the transfer, Miss Armitage." "I already have, Your Grace." He glanced at her notebook. "Of course you have." The dryness in his voice might have been amusement, but he did not use it to diminish the importance of the act. He turned to the butler and housekeeper. The plate-room door was locked after supper. "Yes, Your Grace," the butler replied. "Mrs. Pritchard and I used our keys together. Neither lock has been opened since." "And the service from the dining room, counted on the sideboard, returned under our observation, and placed in the near cabinet. The suspect spoon did not return with it." Clement nodded. "Good. We begin with that cabinet." The two keys turned in separate locks. The door opened. Silver answered the lamplight in orderly ranks. Salvers leaned upright in velvet grooves. Forks lay in fitted trays. Serving pieces rested in shallow drawers, with labels written by different hands across 3 generations. To anyone else, the cabinet might have appeared reassuring. To Winifred, it looked staged. She removed her notebook from beneath her hand. "I will need the plate register, a balance, linen squares, sealing thread, and an empty table for items that require separate examination." Lady Daphne's voice came from the doorway. "You will need permission before issuing orders in my nephew's house." She had entered without announcement, dressed in grey silk and wearing pearls despite the hour. Her composure was complete. Only the tightness around her mouth betrayed the insult she believed the morning represented. Clement did not turn immediately. "Miss Armitage has permission." To sketch silver for an exhibition. Her commission has expanded. By whose authority? He faced his aunt. Mine remains fashionable, I believe. The butler lowered his eyes. Winifred did not. Lady Daphne looked at her as though authority had been handed to the wrong species. You cannot expect senior servants to be directed by a woman from trade. Clement crossed to the writing desk in the corner, drew a sheet of estate paper toward him, and began to write. The scratch of his pen was the only sound in the room. When he finished, he signed his name, sanded the ink, and handed the sheet to Winifred. It appointed her temporary cataloguer for the audit of household plate, and granted her access, in the presence of proper household witnesses, to every room and record necessary for the work. There, he said. Now they are directed by a woman with written authority. Winifred accepted the paper. It was not generosity. It was structure, and she trusted structure more readily than charm. Thank you, Your Grace. Lady Daphne's gaze hardened. This is an extraordinary indulgence. No, Clement said. It is an extraordinary inconvenience. The indulgence was assuming everything was genuine because it shone. Winifred began with the first tray. Each piece was lifted on linen, compared to the register, and weighed. She did not rush. Sterling had its own assurance, not mystical and not infallible, but consistent. Weight settled in the hand. Edges carried the memory of proper making. Sound, when tested gently against a wooden block, held a clear, restrained note. The plated composition pieces did not merely feel lighter, they felt uncertain. By 7:30, she had separated a dessert fork whose shoulders were too thin, a sugar sifter with crude internal filing, and a second serving spoon whose pattern blurred near the hallmark as if copied from a worn impression. 3 pieces in addition to the bent spoon, all from different fitted sections of the cabinet, all bearing the same shallow crescent where metal had been filed beneath the decoration. Clement stood on the opposite side of the table, not speaking unless she addressed him. At first, Winifred assumed impatience. Then she realized he was learning the order of her work. He watched her compare weight before marks, condition before provenance, fact before conclusion. You do not begin with the hallmark, he said at last. No, Your Grace. Why not? Because a mark can be copied. Weight, wear, and construction are more difficult to make agree with a lie. Difficult, but apparently not impossible. Not impossible. Only expensive enough that most fraud depends on the owner not looking closely. His expression sharpened. You mean on the owner believing ownership is a form of knowledge? Winifred raised her eyes. Often it is treated that way. For a moment, neither looked at the silver. The space between them changed, quiet and dangerous, in a manner that had nothing to do with scandal. Clement broke it first. I had intended a jest, he said. I see you have no use for one. I have use for accuracy. A sterner mistress, a more dependable one. The corner of his mouth shifted. Then he glanced toward Lady Daphne, who had remained long enough to hear. We shall try not to interrupt her. By 8 o'clock, the room had grown crowded with evidence. Winifred labeled each suspect piece by cabinet, drawer, and register number. She did not call any item counterfeit in the record. Not yet. She wrote inconsistent weight, surface plating suspected, and mark requires independent confirmation. The restraint irritated Lady Daphne more than accusation would have done. If you believe these are false, why hide behind cautiouser words? She asked. Winifred tied a label to the sugar sifter. Because belief is not a finding. You spoke boldly enough last night. Last night the spoon bent. That was a fact everyone saw. Clement looked at his aunt. Miss Armitage appears determined not to provide us with a convenient exaggeration. She appears determined to prolong her employment. Winifred's fingers paused only once. The old fear returned with familiar precision. One careless phrase, one visible wound, one reason for a room to prefer Lady Daphne's rank over her own truth. She placed the sifter on its linen square and continued. Clement's voice became colder. Miss Armitage's full fee is guaranteed whether this inquiry ends today or next month. You will not question her motive again in front of my servants. Lady Daphne's fan snapped open. Your servants hear far more than is good for them. The housekeeper's face remained composed, but the butler's shoulders altered by the smallest degree. Winifred saw it. Clement did too. Then perhaps, he said, we should give them something true to hear. Lady Daphne left without replying. The door closed behind her. Air seemed to return to the room. Clement did not apologize for his aunt. Winifred was grateful. An apology might have demanded that she comfort him for the behavior of his own house. Instead, he took the plate register from the solicitor and turned several pages. These pieces, he said, their entries were amended. Winifred crossed to him. Each suspect item had a notation added in a newer hand. Seasonal restoration. London. No maker named, no workshop receipt attached, no date of return beyond the month. Clement tapped one entry, the same phrase. And the same omission, Winifred said. Who handled restoration? The butler answered. Mr. Hector Tolland, Your Grace. His firm has attended the family plate for many years. The solicitor moved to the repair files stacked at the end of the table. Dust lifted when he opened the first volume. Several invoices appeared, all bearing the same elegant name. Hector Tolland, London plate contractor and restorer. 8 years of entries, 8 years of objects, leaving one house, and returning under a phrase vague enough to excuse almost anything. Winifred looked at the 3 plated pieces lying apart from the genuine service. The mystery had acquired a name, though not yet a culprit. Clement closed the register with measured care. Send word to Mr. Tolland, he said. Tell him house, Deverill, requires an explanation before another piece of silver crosses his threshold. By the following morning, Winifred had counted 37 pieces of silver and trusted only 31. The discrepancy was not yet large enough to frighten House Deverill. That was precisely what frightened her. Great theft announced itself through absence. Careful theft preferred resemblance. It replaced one object at a time, preserved the pattern, and relied upon rank to mistake possession for vigilance. The sealed evidence box, containing the bent spoon, had been placed overnight in the estate, solicitor's locked strongbox, where it remained under his custody. The 3 additional suspect pieces from the first cabinet lay separately wrapped and labelled in the audit room. None had moved without a written entry. Winifred had insisted upon that before breakfast, and Clement had agreed without complaint. On the 7th May, she returned to the plate room, carrying a small walnut case in her reticule. The leather hinge had cracked years before. One corner had been darkened by the pressure of her father's thumb, repeated so often that the grain appeared polished. She set the case beside her notebook, but did not open it at once. Clement noticed. He had arrived before the solicitor and stood reading the previous day's inventory, with one hand resting against the edge of the table. You have brought reinforcements, he said. Only a comparison tool, Your Grace. That sounds less reassuring. It should. His gaze moved from the worn case to her face. He did not reach for it. Is it yours? Yes. Then I shall attempt the rare discipline of waiting until I'm invited. Winifred unfastened the small brass hook. Inside, fitted into faded green baize, lay a steel repair punch no longer than her little finger. Its handle was worn smooth. The striking end bore a tiny three-petaled design, almost invisible until she turned it beneath the lamp. For one unguarded moment, the plate room vanished. She remembered her father leaning over a workbench in shirt sleeves, his spectacles low on his nose, explaining that honest repairs should not pretend never to have happened. A maker's mark declared origin. A repair mark declared responsibility. He had believed both mattered. The world had taught him otherwise. Winifred placed the punch upon a folded linen square. My father used this on pieces repaired in the Armitage workshop. It is not a statutory hallmark, and it does not certify the metal. It identifies our repair work. Clement bent closer without touching it. 3 petals. Yes, why that design? My mother drew it when they were first married. He said no one would mistake it for a crown. The answer escaped before Winifred could make it impersonal. Clement's expression softened, though not with pity, a wise precaution in a country over-provided with crowns. The solicitor entered, followed by the butler and housekeeper. Winifred waited until all 4 witnesses had taken their places. Then she asked for the chapel service listed in the 1847 room inventory. The butler hesitated. The communion plate is kept in the vestry safe, Miss Armitage. I need only the salt cellar recorded as part of the supporting table service. It was repaired in 1848. Lady Daphne appeared in the doorway. Before he could answer, she had developed an alarming ability to arrive whenever an object threatened to acquire a history beyond her control. The chapel plate is consecrated, she said. It will not be handled for a household experiment. The solicitor cleared his throat. The communion vessels themselves are treated separately, my lady. The salt cellar is domestic plate used at certain chapel suppers. It may be examined under His Grace's authority. How fortunate that everyone has discovered authority except me. Clement looked up from the inventory. You have never lacked authority, Aunt. We are discovering its limits. Her mouth tightened. The butler went to fetch the salt cellar, with the housekeeper accompanying him. During their absence, Winifred prepared a shallow dish of sealing wax and a strip of heavy paper. The punch would be pressed into softened wax to create a comparison impression. The original would remain with her. Clement watched the arrangement. You expected opposition. I expected questions. You brought wax for questions. I brought wax because memory is not evidence. I shall remember never to argue with you near a stationer. She almost smiled. This time she allowed the expression to reach her mouth before returning to the work. When the salt cellar arrived, it was wrapped in white linen and placed at the center of the table. The object was small, heavy, and unmistakably old. Its chased border had been repaired near the base. Winifred did not need the punch to know her father's work. She remembered the minute change in the leaf pattern where he had strengthened a split without erasing it. Still, she said nothing until the piece had been weighed and examined under the lamp. Near the underside of the base, nearly hidden beneath the chased edge, appeared the same 3-petaled impression as the punch. The mark was shallow but clean. Clement leaned closer. There, Lady Daphne gave a dismissive movement of her fan. A shop scratch. Winifred raised her eyes. No, my lady. Daphne's gaze sharpened. You presume to correct me? On this point, yes. The room went very still. Winifred placed the salt cellar back upon the linen. A scratch has no repeated shape. This mark was struck intentionally after the repair was completed. It identifies the workshop that accepted responsibility for the work. A tradesman's vanity, a tradesman's accountability. Daphne turned to Clement. You see what this has become. Her father's private symbol is now being treated as though it outranks the Deverill hallmark. Clement did not look away from the three-petaled mark. No one has said that. You have entered it in the record because it exists. So does dust. Must that be catalogued as well? Winifred felt heat rise beneath her collar, but her hands remained steady. Dust does not tell us who repaired an object when it was likely repaired, or whether a supposed replacement ever passed through the same workshop. Daphne's eyes flickered toward the suspect dessert pieces lying wrapped at the end of the table. It lasted less than a second. Winifred saw it. Clement saw Winifred see it. Make the impression, he said. She softened the wax over a spirit lamp, pressed the steel punch once, and lifted it cleanly. 3 petals appeared in miniature. The solicitor signed the paper beneath the impression, added the date and location, then folded it into the audit folio. Winifred wiped the punch with linen and returned it to the walnut case. Clement waited until the hook had closed. May I see the case? He asked. Not the punch. The distinction mattered. She placed the closed case in his palm. His hand was large enough to conceal it, yet he held it lightly, as if weight could be moral as well as physical. Your father carried this every working day, and now you do, when the work requires it. He returned the case directly to her. Then the house is fortunate that the work required it. Daphne gave a quiet, humorless laugh. The house managed before Miss Armitage arrived. Clement's gaze moved to the wrapped suspect pieces. That is becoming less persuasive by the hour. The next discovery came from the repair register. The solicitor found 2 entries dated October 1848. Both recorded Deverill berry spoons sent to the Armitage workshop for strengthening at the neck. No detailed invoice survived in the estate file, but the notation was clear. 2 spoons, same service, same year. Winifred read the line twice. Her father had repaired them. Therefore, both genuine spoons should bear the 3-petaled mark. The bent spoon sealed in the solicitor's strongbox did not. She had examined its underside at supper before surrendering it. No repair mark. Only the Coppet hallmark and the crescent of filing. Clement came to stand beside her. You are certain the spoon from dinner lacked this symbol? Yes, Your Grace. Could it have worn away? Not without removing more metal than the handle could lose and remain usable. The area beneath the neck was smooth. The solicitor turned another page. A later notation appeared beside the same service. Seasonal restoration. London transfer. No list of individual pieces. No receiving signature. Clement's expression changed. When? June 1849, the solicitor said. Winifred felt the date settle like cold metal in her chest, but she did not explain why. Not yet. The plate register continued beyond it. The same transport chest number appeared beside later restoration entries at Alresford House and Linden Grange. 1 chest moving between London and Kent, 1 vague phrase following it through the years. Clement closed the volume halfway, keeping his finger between the pages. We have been examining cabinets, he said. Tomorrow we examine movement. Winifred looked at the chest number written in faded ink. Somewhere between the 2 Deverill houses, genuine silver had ceased to return as itself. On the 8th May, Winifred began not with silver but with doors. Every cabinet opened under witness. Every tray was counted before it left its room. Every item crossed from one surface to another on linen, accompanied by a written line naming its origin, condition, and temporary destination. Clement had ordered the house-wide inventory. Winifred intended that no one later claim the house had been disturbed carelessly. The plate room yielded the first schedule. The dining room followed. Then came the morning room, the chapel vestry, 2 guest chambers, the carriage house, and the servants' plate cupboards. Linden Grange had always displayed its wealth as though abundance were proof of order. By noon, Winifred understood that abundance could conceal absence just as easily. She worked at a long table in the old estate room, drawing the outline of each object upon heavy paper. A salver became an oval. A candlestick became a narrow tower of ink. A spoon required only a stem, bowl, length, and pattern note. The method looked simple enough for Lady Daphne to dismiss. That was one of its advantages. When an item later failed to fit its own silhouette, no amount of rank could persuade the paper to widen. Clement stood near the window with the porter's movement book open in his hands. He had abandoned dry remarks after the 3rd discrepancy. A pair of chamber candlesticks matched the written count but not each other. One was heavy, old, and worn at the base. The other gleamed more brightly and carried the same pattern in softer, less exact lines. Winifred lifted it on linen and tested the underside. The metal yielded a duller note against the wooden block. "Plated composition," she said. "Not sterling?" Clement asked. "Not throughout?" Lady Daphne, seated beside the cold hearth, looked up from her correspondence. "Must every difference be treated as a crime?" "A difference is not a crime," Winifred replied. "An undocumented substitution may be." "May be," Daphne repeated. "Your vocabulary has become very convenient. Caution is useful when certainty has not yet been earned." Clement closed the movement book, and inconvenient when someone prefers accusation without proof. Lady Daphne's pen stopped. "You have become remarkably protective of Miss Armitage's phrasing." "I am protective of accuracy. It has had a poor reception in this house." Winifred returned the candlestick to its linen square before the exchange could become about her rather than the object. She labelled it Guest Chamber 2, West Mantle, Suspected Plated Substitute. The matching genuine candlestick remained in place under the housekeeper's observation. By 1 o'clock, they had found 2 carriage lamps with silver-plated fittings, where the inventories specified sterling mounts, a chapel cruet lid that belonged to a different service year, and 4 servant hall spoons that were genuine, but had been moved from a superior set. The pattern was not random. Better pieces disappeared from rooms where changes were unlikely to be examined closely. Inferior substitutes appeared in places where polish mattered more than weight. Even the servants had unconsciously completed the deception by moving genuine pieces downward whenever shortages became inconvenient. "We thought the old ones had been reassigned," Mrs. Pritchard said. The housekeeper's dignity had survived 30 years of other people's carelessness. But this admission cost her. Mr. Tolland's men returned trunks after London, and labels were altered. We were told the changes had His Grace's approval. Clement's face did not move. They did not. "No, Your Grace." "Who told you they did?" Mrs. Pritchard glanced toward Lady Daphne. The moment was brief, but its meaning entered the room before anyone spoke. Daphne set down her pen. "Do not look at me as though I inspect transport labels. Mr. Tolland managed restoration. The household obeyed the arrangements placed before it." Winifred heard what had not been said. No one had forged the Duke's signature in front of the servants. No one had needed to. A phrase delivered with confidence, a familiar contractor, a noblewoman who expected obedience, and a household trained not to ask questions had accomplished the same result. Clement moved to the table where Winifred's silhouette sheets lay in ordered rows. "These papers show where each piece was found today." "Yes, Your Grace." "Can they show where it ought to have been?" "If the room inventories and movement records are reliable. And if they are not, then the disagreement becomes part of the evidence." He studied the dark outlines. "You are drawing the house by what it contains, by what it claims to contain." His eyes lifted to hers. "There is a difference." "There usually is." The old plate porter was brought in after luncheon. Mr. Weller had retired 3 years earlier and lived in a cottage on the northern edge of the estate. He arrived in his best coat, his hands clean, his posture rigid with the fear of failing a memory test before a duke. Winifred did not begin with dates. She showed him the lead tags removed from the transport chest and asked how they had been used. His shoulders eased by a fraction. One tag when the chest left miss. Another when it returned. The number went in the movement book. Who fixed the return tags? Usually me. Sometimes Mr. Tolland's man if they arrived late. Did the tag number always match the outgoing entry? Mr. Weller looked toward Clement, as though permission to remember belonged to him. Clement stepped away from the table. "You will not lose your cottage or pension for telling the truth, Mr. Weller. Neither will any servant or former servant under my protection." Lady Daphne's fan opened with a hard whisper. Such assurances invite invention. Clement turned to her. "No, fear invites silence." Mr. Weller swallowed. "There were changes, Your Grace. Not often at first. A chest left with one tag and came back with another. I asked once." Mr. Tolland said the first had cracked during transit. "Did you record the new number?" Winifred asked. "I did, miss. But the repair register did not always show work for that journey." The solicitor opened the porter's movement book to the dates marked on the tags. 3 seasonal transfers carried altered return numbers. 2 matched periods in which plated substitutes had appeared. The third concerned a chest that had travelled from Arlesford House to Linden Grange in June 1849. Winifred felt the date again, but she kept her voice even. "Did anything else change when the chest returned?" Mr. Weller frowned. "It was lighter." Lady Daphne gave an impatient laugh. "You expect us to trust the arm of a retired porter after 8 years." Winifred looked at him. "How did you know it was lighter?" The left handle did not bite the same. He lifted his right hand and closed it, as if grasping an invisible iron grip. Heavy chest pulled down on that side because the hinge sat crooked. When it came back, the pull was gone. That was not poetry. It was the bodily memory of labor. Winifred placed one of the old lead tags before him. "Is this your crimp?" he examined, the flattened edge. "No, miss. Mine closed straight across. This was pinched from the corner." The butler confirmed that Mr. Weller had used the estate crimping tool, which left a level bar. The questioned tags carried diagonal pressure marks. Clement looked from the tags to the false candlestick, then to the long procession of silhouettes. "Can we establish who received the chest on its return?" The solicitor searched the movement book. The usual receiving signature was absent. Instead, a notation in another hand read, "Delivered under contractor's direction." "Mr. Tolland's?" Clement asked. "The hand appears consistent with his invoices." The solicitor replied. "It will require comparison." Lady Daphne rose. "This proves only that a contractor managed his work without troubling the family over every nail and label. It proves the house allowed property to return without confirming what had returned," Winifred said. Daphne's gaze cut toward her. "You are very ready to make servants' uncertainty sound like conspiracy. I am recording a method. I have not yet named its purpose. Clement's attention remained on Mr. Weller. You asked about the changed tag once. What happened? Mr. Tolland said I had grown forgetful, Your Grace. After that, the late chests were received by younger men. The humiliation in the old porter's voice was quiet. It did not need embellishment. Clement took the movement book and placed it beside Winifred's drawings. Your memory has given us more than 8 years of polished assurances, Mr. Weller. You will sign only what you are certain of. Nothing more. Mr. Weller's hand trembled slightly when the solicitor gave him the prepared statement. Winifred read every line aloud before he signed. It named the changed tags, the lighter chest, the altered procedure, and nothing beyond his direct knowledge. When he finished, Clement offered his hand. The porter stared at it before accepting. By evening, the audit room no longer resembled a place for cataloguing beautiful objects. It had become a map of controlled movement. The suspect candlestick stood beside the carriage fitting and the plated serving pieces, each linked to a seasonal transfer. Lead tag numbers matched Hector Tolland's invoices. One invoice claimed a complete restoration during a week when the workshop receipt showed no plate had been delivered at all. Winifred drew a line beneath the date. Clement read it over her shoulder. A restoration without possession, or possession without restoration. Either way, the silver travelled farther on paper than it did by road. Winifred looked across the room at the servants, testimony, the transport tags, and the silhouettes, revealing where genuine objects had been replaced by brighter lies. The house had not been robbed in a single night. It had been taught, piece by piece, not to notice what returned through its own doors. On the 10th May, the morning room smelled faintly of beeswax, cold tea, and the rain that had begun before dawn. Mrs. Pritchard sat near the far window with a basket of household mending, close enough to satisfy propriety and distant enough to grant privacy. Clement stood beside the mantel, one hand resting on the sealed packet of correspondence the solicitor had delivered after breakfast. Winifred remained near the round table, where the movement sheets, porter's statement, and copied invoice dates had been arranged in careful order. The evidence did not yet name Hector Tolland as a thief. It did something more dangerous. It showed that objects had moved through his authority while records became less precise. Tags changed, and inferior metal returned beneath respectable polish. The date troubles you, Clement said. Winifred looked down at the entry from June 1849. Yes, Your Grace. Because of your father? She did not answer at once. Outside, rain pressed softly against the glass. Mrs. Pritchard's needle moved through linen with quiet regularity. Clement did not repeat the question. He had learned that silence could be a form of pressure, but it could also be permission. My father was asked to certify a consignment in 1849, Winifred said at last. Not Deverill plate by name. At least, he was never told that it belonged to this house. The pieces were presented as old sterling requiring repair and remarking after damage. Clement's expression sharpened. Remarking? That was the phrase used. A lawful hallmark cannot simply be renewed because an owner dislikes wear. My father said so. Mr. Tolland replied that the marks had become unreadable and that a private assurance would satisfy the client. A private assurance from your father. A written card stating the metal was sterling and the repairs sound. Clement moved away from the mantel. Was it sterling? No. The answer came plainly. Some pieces were thin silver plate over composition metal. Others contained less silver than the client had been led to believe. My father refused to sign. Clement's gaze dropped to the June entry, and then Winifred folded her hands, though every joint in them wanted motion. Then Mr. Tolland told several clients that my father had first approved the work, accepted payment, and later denied his own judgment when flaws became apparent. Was there proof? There was said to be an assay card bearing my father's signature. Did you see it? No, my father demanded to see it. Mr. Tolland claimed it had been placed with the client's records and could not be released. Clement's jaw tightened. Convenient. Respectable, Winifred corrected. Convenience invites questions. Respectability often prevents them. Mrs. Pritchard's needle paused, then resumed. Clement studied Winifred's face. Your father had no copy. He kept copies of nearly everything. Not that card, because he said he had never written it. Then what happened to the workshop? The first clients did not leave at once. They began by delaying commissions. Then they asked whether another man could inspect my father's repairs before accepting them. One withdrew his account. 2 others followed. By winter, every difficult repair was treated as evidence that my father had become careless. Every ordinary mistake by another craftsman was somehow traced back to him. Her voice remained level, but memory moved beneath it with the slow pressure of deep water. He sold one workbench to pay wages, then the larger rolling mill. By 1851, he worked only on small private repairs for people who had known him before the rumors. He died the following year. Clement's eyes did not leave hers. Of illness, his heart had been weak for some time. Winifred looked toward the rain. Disgrace did not kill him in a dramatic fashion, if that is what you mean. It merely reduced the number of reasons he believed mourning required him. The room went still. Clement did not offer the easy cruelty of saying her father would be proud. He had never known the man. Instead, he crossed to the table and placed both hands upon its edge, as though the distance between sympathy and presumption required physical restraint. Did House Deverill know? I do not know. Did my aunt know? I do not know. Did Tolland's accusation concern the 2 berry spoons repaired in 1848? I do not know. She met his gaze. Those are the answers I can give honestly. Something in his face changed. He had expected grief. What he received was discipline. And the card? He asked. You believe it may still exist. If it was genuine, it may identify a different object. If it was false, the hand, paper, measurements, or date may expose it. Either way, Mr. Tolland kept it useful by keeping it unseen. Clement looked again at the evidence sheets. 2 genuine spoons repaired by your father. 1 plated substitute found here without his mark. A transfer in 1849. A card used to destroy his reputation but never produced for examination. They may connect, Winifred said. They may not. A coincidence does not become proof because it is cruel. No, but cruelty repeated through the same hands deserves attention. He straightened. I have sent a formal request that Mr. Tolland attend Linden Grange and bring all surviving records connected to Deverill restoration. Winifred's pulse changed. When? The letter went yesterday evening after the porter's statement was signed. You acted before telling me. The words were not an accusation, but Clement heard the boundary inside them. Yes, he said. I believed preserving records required speed. I should have told you this morning before asking about your father. She studied him. He did not defend the choice by calling it protection. Thank you for saying so. That is a modest reward for belated courtesy. Belated courtesy is still rarer than confident intrusion. His mouth shifted, but the humor did not erase the gravity between them. Miss Armitage, what happens when Tolland arrives may become unpleasant. If he repeats the old accusation, my aunt will make certain others hear it. Your commission was to prepare a catalogue, not to defend your family before mine." Winifred's fingers rested against the edge of the movement sheet. "What are you offering? Your full fee, a reference stating that your work was exact and indispensable, a carriage wherever you wish to go. The audit will continue without requiring your presence." The offer was careful. No threat, no appeal, no hidden debt. That made it harder to refuse lightly. "Do you believe I should leave?" she asked. Clement's answer came after a pause. "I believe you should be allowed to. That is not the same thing." "No." He glanced toward Mrs. Pritchard, then back to Winifred. "If you remain, I will not promise to restore your father's name. I do not yet have the proof. I will not promise that Tolland will expose himself through arrogance. Men who survive by respectability are often most disciplined when watched. I can promise only that no conclusion will be buried because it embarrasses this house." Winifred felt the old walnut case within her reticule, the steel punch resting where her father had placed it years before. She had spent too long watching powerful people confuse reassurance with justice. Clement offered neither reassurance nor rescue. He offered a process that might fail in public. For the first time, that honesty felt safer than certainty. "I will remain," she said, "not because the house requires me, because the evidence does." Clement inclined his head. "Then the choice is recorded." A soft knock came at the door. The solicitor entered with a telegram folded beneath his thumb. "From London, Your Grace, Mr. Tolland has accepted the summons." Clement broke the seal and read. His eyes moved once across the page, then returned to the final line. "He will arrive tomorrow afternoon." Winifred waited. "There is more," she said. Clement handed her the telegram. Hector Tolland's message was brief, polished, and perfectly assured. He would bring the requested records. He would also bring a Deverill berry spoon bearing the Armitage repair mark, properly made, properly weighted, and never once bent in service. Hector Tolland arrived at Linden Grange shortly after 3 o'clock on the 11th of May in a hired carriage whose polished panels bore no crest and invited no curiosity. The choice suited him. He stepped down wearing a dark blue coat of excellent cloth, silver grey gloves, and the expression of a man accustomed to entering noble houses through doors that remained closed to lesser tradesmen. His dispatch case never left his hand. Winifred watched from the drawing-room window until the butler admitted him. She had expected arrogance. What entered instead was courtesy perfected into armor. Hector bowed first to Clement, then to Lady Daphne, and only afterward acknowledged Winifred. "Miss Armitage," he said. "It has been many years." "8," she replied. "You remember precisely. Some dates become expensive to forget." Lady Daphne moved quickly to soften the edge. "Mr. Tolland has attended Deverill Plate for longer than Miss Armitage has been permitted to inspect it. I trust that distinction will matter." Clement stood beside the writing table, the estate's solicitor at his right. "Today, facts will matter. Distinctions may wait their turn." Hector smiled with professional restraint. "Naturally, Your Grace. I came because I have nothing to conceal. Then the afternoon should be painless. I've always found truth less painful when handled by experts." His gaze settled on Winifred. "Wouldn't you agree?" "Only when the expert does not decide the conclusion before touching the object." The smile remained, though something behind it tightened. Clement indicated the dispatch case. "You said you brought a Deverill berry spoon." "I did." "Place the case on the table." The solicitor will record its contents before anything is removed. Hector hesitated for less than a breath. It was not enough to call resistance. It was enough for Winifred to notice. He set the case down. The solicitor recorded its black leather exterior, brass lock, and unbroken paper seal bearing Hector's business stamp. Hector produced the key from his waistcoat pocket. When the case opened, the first object visible was a narrow velvet tray. Within it rested a berry spoon, whose silver surface had the softened glow of age rather than the hard brightness of fresh plating. Beneath the tray lay a sealed envelope, 2 folded invoices, and a packet of correspondence tied with black ribbon. The solicitor noted each item before Hector lifted the spoon. "This," Hector said, "belongs to the Deverill service of 1822. It was repaired by Mr. Armitage in 1848 and retained by my firm when the account remained unsettled." Lady Daphne turned toward Clement. "There, an explanation at last." Clement did not look at her. "An explanation is not a settlement." Hector offered the spoon across the table. "You may examine it." Winifred did not reach for it. "Place it on the linen, please." His brows rose. "You fear I might influence your hands? I prefer that no one later dispute the transfer." The solicitor spread a clean linen square. Hector laid the spoon upon it. Winifred recorded the moment, then examined the piece under the lamp. The weight settled properly in her palm. The stem was full and strong, the hallmark aligned with the service date. Beneath the neck, almost hidden by the chaste decoration, sat the 3-petaled repair mark struck by her father's steel punch. For one instant, grief moved through her with such force that the room seemed to recede. Her father had held this spoon. He had strengthened the narrow point where the stem met the bowl. He had returned it sound. The mark remained because honest work endured even when reputation did not. Hector mistook her silence for defeat. "You see, Miss Armitage." Mr. Armitage repaired genuine Deverill silver. "The work has survived perfectly." "Yes," she said, "it has, and this spoon does not bend." "No." Lady Daphne leaned back with visible satisfaction. "Then perhaps we may stop treating one damaged utensil as evidence of a conspiracy." Winifred turned the spoon beneath the lamp. "This piece proves only that a genuine spoon exists outside the estate register and has remained in Mr. Tolland's possession for years." Hector's tone cooled. "Under a lawful craftsman's lien. That has not yet been established. You doubt the unpaid account? I have not seen it." He drew one of the folded invoices from the case. "Then you shall." The solicitor received it first. The document recorded repair and retention fees, but the description was broad. One item from berry service held pending payment. No spoon number appeared. No receiving signature from House Deverill followed the notation. Clement read it twice. "Why was this never brought to my attention? Your aunt handled household restoration at that time." Lady Daphne's fan paused. Hector continued smoothly. "My firm sent reminders." Silence followed. "I assumed the family preferred the matter remain discreet." "You assumed a duke would abandon registered plate over a modest invoice?" Clement asked. "I assumed old houses sometimes value discretion more than teaspoons." "Berry spoons," Winifred said. Hector looked at her. "A small distinction. Not when the service count depends upon it." She placed the spoon back on the linen. "The register records 2 berry spoons sent to my father for repair in 1848. This is one. Where is the other?" "Returned, presumably." "To whom?" "The household receiving staff." "Which member?" "After 8 years, I cannot say." "Which transport chest?" I did not come prepared for an interrogation about every hinge and label. Clement's voice remained quiet. You were summoned because every hinge and label has become relevant. Hector's courtesy thinned. Your Grace, I have served houses whose plate exceeds the contents of this room. Minor inconsistencies arise whenever servants, porters, and country officers exchange property across seasons. Minor inconsistencies do not replace sterling with composition metal, nor does one bent spoon prove my firm did so. No, Winifred said, but the genuine spoon in your case proves at least one registered piece remained under your control while inferior silver entered the house. Hector turned fully toward her. Your father taught you to make large accusations from small scratches. He taught me to separate what I know from what I want others to fear. The room fell silent. Clement's attention shifted to the sealed envelope. What is that? Hector's expression recovered. The assurance your father provided in 1849. Winifred's hands went still. The envelope bore Hector's old business seal, faded but intact. Across the front, in a clerk's hand, were the words, Assay Certification, Armitage Workshop. Lady Daphne spoke before anyone else could. You said no such document could be found. I said it remained with the client records, Hector replied. It did. During a recent reordering of archived accounts, I recovered it. Clement looked at the unbroken seal. You have not opened it? Not since it was filed, yet you know what it contains. I witnessed its preparation. Winifred met his eyes. Did you witness my father sign it? I witnessed him return the card to my office. That was not my question. Hector's jaw hardened. You were a young woman in a workshop, Miss Armitage. You may not have known every decision your father made, and you may be relying on that possibility. Lady Daphne rose. This has gone far enough. Tomorrow's county supper will include trustees who have already heard rumors of false plate. Mr. Tolland should present the genuine spoon and the card before them. The matter can be corrected publicly. Clement turned to Winifred. Do you wish the supper cancelled? The question caught everyone except her. He was offering concealment, but he was asking rather than commanding. Winifred looked at the spoon bearing her father's mark, then at the sealed envelope that might preserve his signature or weaponize it once more. No, Your Grace. Hector's eyes narrowed. You're certain? If the card is genuine, it should survive examination. If it is being misused, privacy will only help the person misusing it. Clement held her gaze. Then the supper proceeds. The solicitor placed the spoon back in Hector's velvet tray, but did not return the case. Until tomorrow. Clement said, the dispatch case and all its contents remain sealed in the estate office under dual custody. You will receive a signed receipt. Hector's courtesy finally broke at the edges. Your Grace, those are my business papers. Then you will be relieved to know they are being protected with unusual care. The solicitor closed the case, applied a fresh estate seal across the lock, and recorded the transfer. Hector watched each movement with the stillness of a man forced to surrender control while pretending it had been his idea. When the receipt was signed, he looked at Winifred. Tomorrow, Miss Armitage, the card will speak for itself. She glanced at the sealed case. Documents rarely speak for themselves, Mr. Tolland. People choose the story around them. By 7 o'clock on the 12th May, the long drawing room at Linden Grange had been transformed into a county supper arranged around the language of antiquarian respectability. Silver candlesticks stood beneath family portraits. Trustees of the subscription exhibition occupied the best chairs. 2 neighboring landowners, a clergyman known for collecting medieval seals, and 3 ladies whose opinions travelled faster than formal invitations, had all accepted Lady Daphne's summons. She had called the gathering an opportunity to correct unfortunate rumours before they injured the Deverill name. Winifred understood the true purpose before the first guest arrived. Hector Tolland did not intend merely to defend his workmanship. He intended to make her knowledge appear personal, emotional, and therefore untrustworthy. The sealed dispatch case had been brought from the estate office by the solicitor and placed upon a side table in full view of the room. The estate seal across the lock remained unbroken. The genuine control spoon and the unopened assay card were still inside. Clement stood near the hearth, formally dressed and outwardly composed, but the stillness in him had changed since the previous afternoon. He had asked Winifred twice whether she wished the supper cancelled. She had refused twice. Now there would be witnesses to whatever the documents proved. There would also be witnesses to whatever story Hector placed around them. Lady Daphne opened the evening with practiced grace. "We are gathered because an object from the Deverill service was damaged during examination, and questions have since been raised regarding the authenticity of certain household plate. Mr. Tolland has kindly brought records capable of settling the matter." Her gaze moved toward Winifred. "Miss Armitage has assisted with drawings, not cataloguing, not authentication. Drawings." Winifred felt the reduction settle across the room. Hector rose. "I should first say that no responsible tradesman objects to scrutiny. Old plate often carries repairs, substitutions within matched services, and irregular records caused by generations of household movement. Such facts require experience. Without it, ordinary damage may be mistaken for fraud. Then experience will welcome precise questions," Winifred said. Several heads turned. Lady Daphne's smile thinned. Clement gestured to the solicitor. "Open the case." The solicitor displayed the unbroken estate seal, cut it before the assembled guests, and unlocked the dispatch case. He recorded the removal of the velvet tray, the genuine berry spoon, the sealed assay card, the invoices, and the tied correspondence. Each item was placed separately upon white linen. Hector did not touch them. "The spoon first," he said. "It is genuine Deverill silver from the service of 1822. It bears the lawful marks, the correct weight, and the repair symbol of the Armitage workshop." The solicitor handed it to an independent balance set on the table. The recorded weight agreed with the old register within a small allowance for repair and wear. Winifred examined the neck from where she stood. Her father's three-petalled mark remained visible beneath the chaste pattern. Hector lifted a preserved pear from a glass dish with another serving utensil, then looked toward the solicitor. Perhaps the same simple test may be repeated. Clement's expression cooled. "There will be no theatrical bending of registered property." "I have no intention of bending it, Your Grace." Hector received permission to use the genuine spoon under the solicitor's observation. He placed the pear in its bowl and held it above the dish. The stem did not yield. A murmur passed through the room. Lady Daphne allowed the sound to grow before speaking. "There, the service is not defective." Winifred kept her voice calm. "One genuine spoon does not establish that every spoon presently in the house is genuine. Nor does one damaged piece establish that Mr. Tolland substituted anything," Daphne replied. "No one has said it does. You have encouraged servants to question 8 years of household management. The records encouraged them." Hector returned the spoon to the linen. "The simpler explanation is that the item used at supper had already been damaged or replaced without my knowledge. Miss Armitage saw inferior metal and assumed a conspiracy connected to her father's old grievance. He turned toward the guests, with regret arranged carefully across his face. I do not blame her. Family loyalty can distort the judgment of even an intelligent woman. Clement's hand tightened once against the mantle. Winifred looked only at Hector. Open the card. The solicitor lifted the sealed envelope. Hector's old business seal was intact beneath the newer estate record label added the previous day. He broke the original seal and withdrew a stiff cream card covered in faded writing. At the bottom stood the signature. Winifred knew from invoices, birthday notes, and the final letter her father had written before illness made his hand unsteady. Matthew Armitage. The sight of it struck with such force that she had to draw one careful breath before speaking. Hector watched her. You recognize the signature? Yes. The solicitor read the card aloud. It certified that an item of silver submitted in October 1849 had been examined, weighed, and found consistent with sterling of the stated standard after repair. A series of measurements followed, along with an abbreviated commission description. Lady Daphne leaned back. Then Mr. Armitage did certify Deverill silver. The card does not say Deverill, Winifred replied. It was filed with Deverill records, Hector said, by you, because the object belonged to the account. Which object? A piece from the berry service. Winifred held out her hand toward the copy the solicitor had begun making. The weight is too great for a berry spoon. Hector's expression did not change. Old measurements vary, not by several ounces. The item may have been weighed with fittings. A spoon has no separate fittings. One of the trustees shifted in his chair. The clergyman leaned forward to see the card. Winifred pointed without touching it. There is an abbreviation before the commission number. CC. It may refer to chapel service. Or county collection, Hector said. Or client copy, Lady Daphne added. Or any number of private notations no longer recoverable. Winifred looked toward the estate register on the solicitor's table. Then let us recover what can be recovered. The dimensions listed here do not match this spoon. The bowl is too short, the total weight too high, and the repair date differs from the 1848 entry for the berry pair. Hector smiled faintly. You have had less than a minute with the card. The figures do not improve with age. A ripple of restrained amusement came from one corner. Clement did not smile. He moved closer to the table. The card requires independent comparison with the chapel inventory, the repair books, and the London register. Naturally, Hector said, but until then, Your Grace, Miss Armitage's accusation has already damaged my firm. She has implied theft before servants and family guests on the strength of a utensil she alone handled when it failed. I did not accuse you of theft. You have arranged the facts so others may do it for you. Lady Daphne rose slowly. Clement, this must end. A hired woman has placed the honor of this family beneath her private grievance. If you allow her name to appear on the exhibition catalogue, every conclusion will be read as revenge. Winifred turned to Clement. She had known the attack would come. She had not known how much his answer would matter. He looked at the card, the genuine spoon, the trustees, and the guests who had arrived expecting certainty. His instinct moved toward control. She saw it before he spoke. The audit will continue, he said, privately. No final catalogue will be issued until every mark, weight, and record has been independently confirmed. Hector's face became cautiously satisfied. Lady Daphne remained standing, and the attribution. A pause followed. It was not long. It was long enough. The working catalogue will carry no attribution until the inquiry is complete, Clement said. The words did not accuse Winifred. They did something quieter. They removed her. Several guests exchanged glances. What they would remember was not that the Duke had preserved the investigation. They would remember that he had withheld her name. Winifred looked at him. Would the truth be safer? Your Grace, if no one knew a woman found it. His expression changed at once. That is not what I said. It is what the room heard. Lady Daphne folded her hands. The room heard prudence. The room heard that the work may continue once the worker becomes invisible. Clement took a step toward her. Miss Armitage, I am preventing a disputed conclusion from being published before verification. Then withhold the conclusion, not the author. Silence filled the drawing room. Winifred crossed to the working folio lying beside the register. A narrow ribbon marked her commission pages. She untied it, wound it once around her fingers, and placed it on the table before Clement. If my name is too dangerous for the catalogue, Your Grace, it is too dangerous for the labour that creates it. The control spoon and assay card remained on the linen between the solicitor and the witnesses, genuine objects serving a false story. Winifred inclined her head to the room. Then she walked out beneath the portraits. Without waiting for anyone to grant her leave, the morning of the 13th May began with Winifred, placing another person's property in exact order and gathering her own. She worked in the audit room before breakfast. While the house remained quiet enough for clocks and distant servants' bells to sound important, the working silhouette sheets lay in numbered stacks beside the plate register. The estate copies belonged to the commission. Her private sketches did not. She separated them carefully, leaving every measurement, room reference, and observation necessary for the audit to continue, while retaining the original studies drawn by her own hand and the notes recording how she had reached each conclusion. The distinction was not spite. It was authorship. The genuine control spoon and the assay card had been returned after the supper to the solicitor's custody. He had placed both in the estate strong box under a fresh seal, with the opened envelope, the invoices, and a signed account of every person who had witnessed their examination. The bent spoon remained in its separate, felt-lined evidence box within the same locked room. Nothing had been altered. Nothing had vanished. Only Winifred's name had been removed. The solicitor entered as she tied the estate sheets with plain tape. He looked older than he had the previous week. His Grace asked me to say the catalogue may still carry your name when the inquiry is complete. That is not the decision he made last night. He made it under pressure. So did I. The solicitor glanced toward the private sketches at her right hand. Will you leave copies? The house has copies of every object examined, every weight recorded, and every room location established. These are my working studies and conclusions. I will not surrender them to an anonymous publication. No one intends to steal your work. Winifred met his eyes. No one ever calls it stealing when the woman is paid. He lowered his gaze. To his credit, he did not argue again. She handed him the bundled estate sheets and the written authority Clement had given her on the 6th of May. Please record that I returned these voluntarily and that the audit folio remained in your custody throughout. He did so. She waited until he signed and dated the receipt. Then she made one further request. I require a certified copy of the assay card. The original must remain in the strong box. I am not asking for the original. The card was used before witnesses to question my father's integrity and my Professional judgment. I have a right to inspect an accurate copy. The solicitor hesitated only long enough to consider the form. I can prepare a copy and certify it against the original before you depart. Include the dimensions, date letter, abbreviations, and every mark on both sides. Of course. The door opened behind him. Clement entered alone. He had changed since the supper, though no one else might have seen it. His coat was immaculate. His expression was controlled. The confidence beneath both had developed a fracture. He looked first at the returned papers, then at the walnut case beside Winifred's reticule. "You are leaving?" "Yes, Your Grace. The audit is not complete. Neither is my dignity. I prefer not to continue spending one to preserve the other." The solicitor gathered the estate sheets and withdrew to make the certified copy. The door remained open. Mrs. Pritchard was visible at the far end of the corridor, an unobtrusive guardian of propriety. Clement came no closer than the opposite side of the table. I was wrong. Winifred had prepared herself for explanation, justification, and the solemn language powerful men used when they wished regret to resemble wisdom. The plainness of his words unsettled her. "You believed you were being prudent." "I believed anonymity would shield the work until the dispute was settled. It would have shielded the house." His silence confirmed it. "And perhaps you," he said. "No. It would have protected the conclusions while leaving me available to be dismissed as emotional, vindictive, or incompetent. My labor would have remained useful after my name became inconvenient." "I see that now. You saw enough last night to pause." The words struck him. She watched him accept the blow without retreating behind rank. "Yes," he said. "I paused because the room expected me to choose between your credibility and the house's reputation. I chose procedure. I told myself that procedure was neutral. It is rarely neutral when only one person is asked to disappear." Clement looked down at the ribbon she had removed from the folio the previous night. It lay where she had placed it, narrow and harmless on the table. "I cannot undo what the room heard. No, I can correct it. Correction is not the same as permission to continue." His eyes lifted. "Then what would permission require? Not an anonymous retainer." She saw the question in his face and answered it before he could speak. The solicitor mentioned the possibility. "I instructed him to offer your full fee and continued payment while the inquiries proceeded privately. Payment without attribution, protection without exposure. The same mistake, Your Grace, made more generously." A faint, bitter humor touched his mouth and vanished. "You are remarkably efficient at removing the comfort from my intentions. Intentions are comfortable because the person who holds them does not have to live inside their effect." He turned away for one moment toward the locked cabinets and the rows of labels she had created. When he faced her again, there was less of the Duke in his posture and more of the man who had listened while she spoke of her father. "Where will you go?" "To my godmother in Maidstone. She is widowed and has room for me." "A carriage will take you." "I can hire one." "You can. The roads are poor after the rain and a closed carriage is already being prepared. Accept it for safety, not obedience." Winifred studied him. He was learning, though learning did not erase harm. "I will accept the carriage." "Thank you." "Do not thank me as though I have agreed to return." "I won't." The contraction sounded human in a room overfilled with formal language. He placed no command between them. He offered no promise of marriage, protection, or restored honor. She was grateful for that restraint, though gratitude did not soften her decision. A movement in the corridor drew their attention. Lady Daphne stood beyond Mrs. Pritchard, fully dressed for morning calls. "So it is true," she said. "Miss Armitage is abandoning the inquiry." "I am withdrawing my commission," Winifred replied. An elegant phrase for retreat. Daphne's gaze moved to the private sketches and walnut case. One might almost think departure easier than admitting error. Clement's voice became cold. "No one in this house will describe Miss Armitage's departure as an admission of anything. Guests will form their own conclusions. Then you will not assist them." Daphne's expression sharpened. "You cannot govern every drawing room in Kent." "No, I can govern this one." She looked from him to Winifred and understood that further cruelty would cost her more than it gained. "Mr. Tolland intends to return to London tomorrow," she said. "He sees no reason to remain where his expertise is treated as criminal. Mr. Tolland will leave only after the solicitor records the contents of his case and obtains his signed acknowledgement that the control spoon and assay card remain in estate custody," Clement replied. "His convenience has ceased to determine mine." Daphne departed without farewell. By 11 o'clock, Winifred's trunk had been strapped behind the closed carriage, the household assembled only in fragments. Servants appearing at doors and corridor, turns under the pretense of work. They had watched her enter the plate room with written authority. Now they watched her leave with a small reticule, her private papers, and the walnut case containing her father's repair punch. She carried no Deverill silver. She had taken nothing that did not bear her own history. The solicitor came down the steps with a folded document. "The certified copy," he said, compared line by line with the original. Winifred opened it before entering the carriage. The dimensions remained wrong for a berry spoon. The weight remained several ounces too great. Near the commission number, the clerk had reproduced the faint abbreviation she had noticed at supper. C.C. Beneath it stood a date letter that did not match the spoon's 1848 repair entry. "This must be checked against the London Register," the solicitor said quietly. "And the chapel inventory." Yes, Winifred folded the copy and placed it beside the walnut case. Clement stood several feet away, bareheaded despite the damp air. He did not ask her to stay. "Miss Armitage." She looked at him from the carriage step. "Your Grace, I will not publish a word of your work without your name or consent. That is the first correct decision you have made about it since last night." Pain crossed his face, controlled but visible. "I know." She entered the carriage. As it moved down the drive toward Maidstone, Linden Grange receded behind wet trees and pale stone. Winifred did not look back again. She opened the certified copy upon her lap and studied the tiny letters until their meaning separated from the noise surrounding them. The first C was not part of a client notation. It preceded a familiar ecclesiastical inventory mark, Chapel Cup. The card was genuine. The signature was her father's. The object Hector had used to condemn him was not the berry spoon at all. On the 14th of May, Winifred spread the certified copy of the assay card across her godmother's dining table and placed beside it a sketch she had not opened in years. The house in Maidstone was modest, respectable, and quiet after the grandeur of Linden Grange. Its windows looked toward a narrow garden bordered by damp brick walls. A silver teapot sat between Winifred and Mrs. Vale, who had listened without interruption while the entire Deverill affair was explained. The sketch came from a bundle of her father's workshop studies. It showed a chapel communion cup in profile, with the height, bowl width, stem diameter, and repaired weight written in his small, exact hand. Winifred had copied the drawing before the workshop closed, because she could not bear to see every record sold with the benches and tools. Now she aligned the figures with the card Hector Tolland had produced. They matched, not approximately, exactly. The weight on the card belonged to the cup. The measurements belonged to the cup. Even the abbreviated notation beside the commission number corresponded to chapel inventory form her father had used in 1849. The signature was genuine because the document itself was genuine. Hector had not forged her father's approval. He had placed a truthful card beside the wrong object and trusted society to mistake proximity for proof. Mrs. Vale poured tea, though Winifred had not touched the first cup. Then you can clear your father's name. I can show that this card does not concern the berry spoon. Isn't that enough? Not yet. Winifred placed one finger beside the copied date letter. The card proves what father examined. It does not prove where the genuine Deverill spoons went, who substituted plated pieces, or whether Hector acted alone. If I return with only this, Lady Daphne will call it a clerical misunderstanding, and the Duke Winifred folded her hands. He will call it a matter requiring further verification. Mrs. Vale regarded her over the teapot. She was a small woman in her late 50s, widowed for 11 years, and immune to the reverence rank inspired in people who had never been injured by it. You are still angry with him? Yes? Good. Anger is often useful when disappointment would rather make a woman foolish. Winifred looked down at the card. He believed he was protecting the inquiry. Men with power are fond of protecting the thing and forgetting the person. He admitted he was wrong. That is better than most. Mrs. Vale added milk to her tea. It is not the same as being right. Winifred almost smiled. She drew a fresh sheet of paper toward her and began a letter to the estate solicitor. She requested 3 things. First, a certified comparison between the 1849 assay card and the chapel inventory at Linden Grange. Second, a search of the appropriate London register for the date sequence and lawful marks connected to the suspect pieces. Third, letters of introduction permitting an independent assayer to examine her copies and any recovered records without treating her as an agent of House Deverill. She did not ask Clement to rescue the investigation. She did not ask him to retrieve her name from the drawing room where he had allowed it to be removed. She asked for access. Mrs. Vale read the finished letter. You intend to go to London? Yes. When? Tomorrow, if the necessary letters arrive. Then I shall go with you. Winifred looked up. The journey will be long. So was my marriage, and I survived that with less comfortable upholstery. This time Winifred did smile. You do not have to accompany me. No, I choose to. That appears to be the important distinction in this story. The letter left for Linden Grange before noon. Clement arrived the following morning in a closed carriage bearing the Deverill arms, though he came into Mrs. Vale's parlour without ceremony. Rain had cleared overnight, leaving the Maidstone streets bright beneath a thin sun. He had travelled early. The fatigue around his eyes suggested he had slept little. Mrs. Vale remained in the room with her account book open, preserving propriety while making no attempt to disguise that she intended to hear every word. Clement bowed to her, then to Winifred. Miss Armitage, Your Grace. He placed a leather folder on the table. The letters you requested. One is addressed to an independent assayer in London. One authorizes inspection of Deverill transport records and contractor invoices held at Alresford House. The solicitor has prepared a certified statement confirming that the original assay card remains in his strong box at Linden Grange. Winifred opened the folder. The documents were direct, formal, and free of instructions about what conclusion she should reach. Thank you. There is more. Clement removed a second paper. The chapel inventory was examined last night. The communion cup is recorded at the same weight and dimensions as the card. Your reading was correct. The words should have brought triumph. Instead, Winifred felt a quiet pressure behind her ribs. Her father's signature had not betrayed him. It had been made to appear that it had. Who knows? She asked. The solicitor, Mrs. Pritchard, the butler, and I. No one else has been informed. Lady Daphne? Not yet. Hector? No. Clement's mouth hardened. He left Linden Grange before dawn. Winifred's attention sharpened. With the dispatch case. The solicitor recorded its contents before departure. Hector signed an acknowledgement that the genuine control spoon, the assay card, the opened envelope, and the related invoices remain in estate custody. He took only his private correspondence after each sheet was counted and described. Did he object? At length, the documents remained. Relief came, not because Clement had acted forcefully, but because the objects had not been allowed to divide into contradictory locations. The control spoon and original card were still secured at Linden Grange. Hector was travelling toward London without them. When did he depart? Shortly before 5. If the roads are favourable, he may reach London by afternoon. Then he will have several hours before us. Clement nodded. I can send men ahead. No. The refusal came quickly. Not men to seize anything. Men to observe his workshop, prevent records from being removed, and accompany you. That would announce that the Duke of Arlesford is conducting the inquiry through me. Every tradesman we question would answer your title before answering the evidence. There may be risk. There is already risk. I am aware of that. His voice remained restrained, but concern had entered it. What do you require from me? The question altered the room. He had asked before at Linden Grange, but then he had already decided what protection should look like. Now he stood without a plan he expected her to obey. Winifred looked at the letters, the certified statement, and the copied card beside her father's old sketch. Keep the house still while I follow what left it. Clement held her gaze. Meaning, no one removes the transport books, no one rewrites the repair register, no cabinet is opened without witnesses. Lady Daphne receives no opportunity to call servants privately and improve their memories. The solicitor keeps the control spoon and original card sealed. You remain at Linden Grange. A flicker of resistance crossed his face. You do not want me in London. I do not want your rank arriving before my questions, Mrs. Vale turned a page in her account book with deliberate quietness. Clement glanced toward her, then back to Winifred. You will travel with Mrs. Vale? Yes, by post-chaise. Tomorrow morning. We will lodge in London overnight as long as the inquiry requires. And if Hector attempts to interfere, I will go first to the assayer named in your letter, then to the records. I will not meet Hector privately. Clement considered every answer. Winifred could see the command forming in him and being dismissed before it reached his mouth. Then I will keep Linden Grange still, he said. The solicitor will report any movement. The house records will remain under dual custody. That is what I need. Not an escort, no. Not my presence, no. Pain touched his expression, but he did not make it her burden. Very well. He rose. Before leaving, he looked at her father's sketch. May I ask one thing? You may ask. When you prove the card belongs to the cup, will you return? Proof of the card is not proof of the entire scheme. That was not my question. Winifred folded the sketch and placed it beside the walnut case. I will return when the terms of my work no longer require me to disappear. Clement bowed his head once. Then I know what remains unfinished. By dawn on the 16th May, the post-chaise stood before Mrs. Vale's house. Winifred carried the certified copy, her private sketches, the access letters, and the walnut case containing her father's steel punch. She carried no Deverill silver. The genuine control spoon and original assay card remained locked in the solicitor's strong box at Linden Grange. As the chaise turned toward the London road, she did not feel like a dismissed employee pursuing a patron's mystery. She felt like the one person still free to ask where the silver had gone. By the time the post-chaise reached London on the evening of the 16th May, Winifred's back ached from the road, and Mrs. Vale had declared 3 times that English coaching inns survived by making travellers grateful for any chair that did not move. They took rooms in a respectable house near Holborn, arranged through Clement's letter of introduction, and began the inquiry the following morning. The independent assayer received them in a narrow office above a shop whose front windows displayed cups, salvers, and spoons under steady grey light. He was a careful man who spoke more warmly to metal than to people. Winifred placed the certified copy of the 1849 assay card beside her father's chapel cup sketch. She did not place the walnut case on the table until he asked what comparison mark she carried. The original card remains sealed at Linden Grange, she said. This copy was certified against it by the estate solicitor. And the object named here, the assayer asked. I believe it was a chapel communion cup repaired by my father. He read the measurements, then aligned them with the sketch. Height, bowl width, stem diameter, repaired weight. Each figure matched. He examined the faint commission letters through a lens. CC, he said, not berry service. Chapel cup, Winifred replied. That would be my reading. Could the same card describe a spoon? Mrs. Vale asked. The assayer looked almost offended by the suggestion, only if the spoon were intended for a giant. Winifred allowed herself one breath of relief. The truth had not changed because an expert confirmed it, but confirmation made the truth portable. It could leave her memory and enter a record no drawing room could dismiss as filial emotion. The assayer prepared a signed statement that the card's dimensions and weight were inconsistent with any Deverill berry spoon shown in the copied service schedule. He also examined the copied pseudo-marks Winifred had drawn from the plated pieces. These date letters do not agree with the sequence claimed, he said. Someone has imitated the appearance of old marks without understanding their order. Can that be established from the register? Yes, if the recorded sponsor and date combinations are preserved. Clement's second letter opened the way. At the registry inquiry, later that day, Winifred did not ask to remove any original volume. She requested only a certified extract of the entries corresponding to the genuine Deverill service and the suspect marks. The clerk compared the sequences, copied them, and affixed the proper certification. The false combinations were impossible. One sponsor's mark had not been registered until years after the date letter beside it. Another belonged to a different class of article. The bent spoon itself remained sealed in Kent, but the copied marks were enough to prove that its surface had been made to look respectable rather than lawful. Mrs. Vale watched the clerk sand the ink. "Will that satisfy a county supper?" she asked, when they returned to the street. "It will satisfy anyone who prefers records to Lady Daphne's confidence," Winifred said. That appears to exclude half of England. Then we must find the silver. The first true lead came from Hector's invoices at Alresford House. Clement's authorization allowed Winifred to inspect contractor copies kept in the London Household Office. But the originals remained where they were. She worked beneath the supervision of the house steward and a clerk, comparing consignment numbers with the transport tags recorded at Linden Grange. One repeated code appeared beside 3 restoration journeys. Tolland 7C. The same code had been written in the margin of a later invoice beside the phrase temporary security. No object was named. No amount was shown. Only an address near Clerkenwell and a pawnbroker's abbreviated mark appeared beneath it. "That is not a workshop address," Winifred said. The steward's face tightened. "No, miss." Mrs. Vale closed her parasol with decision. "Then we should go before someone remembers to warn them." They did not go alone. The Duke's London solicitor, summoned through the same letter of authority, met them at the pawnbroker's office and formally stated the estate's claim before any parcel was opened. The pawnbroker protested that he dealt in lawful pledges and had no wish to be drawn into noble disputes. "Then you will be pleased by paperwork," Winifred said. "It prevents disputes from becoming inventions." His secured register contained the code Tolland 7C. The pledge description read mixed old plate, private family repair account. 3 pieces remained in storage because the loan had been renewed repeatedly rather than redeemed. The pawnbroker brought out a sealed parcel wrapped in brown paper and tied with coarse cord. Before he cut it, the solicitor recorded the seal, cord, register number, and condition. Mrs. Vale witnessed each line. Inside lay a small salver, a sugar basket, and a berry spoon darkened by storage but unmistakably genuine. Winifred did not touch the spoon until it had been placed on linen. Her fingers remained steady as she turned it beneath the office lamp. Near the repaired neck, 3 petals emerged from the tarnish. Her father's mark. For several seconds, she could hear only the faint movement of carts in the street below. Matthew Armitage had repaired this object honestly. It had left his workshop genuine. Years later, it had been pawned under a contractor's code while a plated substitute returned to House Deverill. "Is it the missing second spoon?" the solicitor asked. "It matches the 1848 repair entry," Winifred said. "The exact identity must be confirmed against the estate measurements. But the repair mark is my father's." She opened the walnut case and made no impression from the original punch. Instead, she placed it beside the earlier certified wax copy sent from Linden Grange and compared the 3-petal design without striking anything. The forms matched. The pawnbroker produced the parcel ticket. On its reverse, beneath the contractor code, appeared a series of payment references. The funds had not gone directly to Hector's ordinary business account. They had been routed through a household repair allowance authorized for Lady Daphne Deverill. Winifred read the entry twice. "Does this mean Lady Daphne received the money?" Mrs. Vale asked. "It means payments were credited through the allowance she controlled," Winifred replied. "We still need the corresponding household instructions before claiming more." The solicitor nodded. "And custody. The parcel should be sealed now," Winifred said. "You should hold it under signed receipt until it can be transferred to the estate solicitor at Linden Grange." The pawnbroker objected. "I cannot release pledged property merely because a duke sends a letter." "You received formal notice before opening it," the solicitor replied. "The estate asserts ownership, and the goods will remain under legal custody pending civil recovery. your financial claim will be preserved. Every piece was wrapped separately, listed, returned to the parcel, and sealed with the London solicitor's mark. A receipt named the contents, the original register number, the condition of the wrapping, and the persons present. Only after all signatures had been placed did Winifred allow herself to sit. The grief came quietly. Not collapse, not spectacle. Her eyes filled while she looked at the brown parcel, now holding proof that her father's work had survived the lie told about him. Mrs. Vale placed one hand over hers and said nothing. A clerk entered from the outer office. A gentleman has called regarding the parcel. He says he represents Mr. Tolland and wishes to redeem it immediately. The solicitor folded the custody receipt. He is too late. Winifred looked toward the closed door. Hector had learned enough to send an agent, but not to know what had already been recorded. The parcel remained sealed on the solicitor's table. The original assay card and control spoon remained locked at Linden Grange. The certified extract lay in Winifred's document case. Each object occupied one place, under one chain of custody, and together they had begun to describe the same method. Genuine silver left under restoration labels. Thin, plated substitutes returned. Originals were pawned or sold. Payments traveled through Lady Daphne's allowance account. That evening, a letter from Clement awaited Winifred at her lodging. He reported that no cabinet had been opened without witnesses, no record had moved, and Lady Daphne had twice requested access to the household instruction books and been refused. He did not ask when Winifred would return. He did not praise her courage or offer to send protection she had declined. The final line read, "Tell me what access the truth requires." Beneath it, Winifred placed the copied phrase from the pawnbroker's ticket, written in the same formal hand as several Deverill repair instructions. Make the old service answer twice. Winifred returned to Kent on the 20th May with Mrs. Vale beside her, the certified hallmark extract locked in her document case, and the London solicitor's sealed parcel travelling separately undersigned. Custody with a clerk who was to deliver it directly to the estate solicitor at Linden Grange. The journey from London had begun the previous morning and ended first in Maidstone, where fatigue required sense rather than heroics. Only after a night's rest did Winifred accept the written invitation that restored neither employment nor obedience, but asked whether she would return as an independent examiner. Linden Grange appeared unchanged when the carriage turned into the drive. Its pale stone, clipped lawns, and orderly windows offered the same assurance they had offered before the silver bent. Winifred knew better now than to mistake appearance for condition. Clement waited inside the morning room with the estate solicitor and Mrs. Pritchard. Lady Daphne was not present, neither was Hector Tolland. The control spoon, the original assay card, its opened envelope, the invoices, and the bent counterfeit spoon all remained under the solicitor's custody in separate sealed containers within the estate strongbox. The porter's movement book and repair register lay on the central table. Beside them rested a new memorandum written on Deverill estate paper but left unsigned. Clement bowed when Winifred entered. "Miss Armitage, Your Grace." His gaze moved briefly to Mrs. Vale, who took a chair near the window with the settled air of a woman prepared to defend propriety and common sense in equal measure. "The London parcel arrived this morning," Clement said. The seals were examined before the clerk departed. "Nothing has been opened. Good. The certified extract?" Winifred touched the document case. "With me. It has not left my possession since the registry clerk sealed it." Clement nodded. He looked as though he wished to say more, but she had not returned for apology. "Before I examine anything further," she said, "the terms must be settled. They are on the table. Those are your terms. They are a beginning." The distinction mattered. Winifred removed a folded sheet from her reticule and placed it beside his memorandum. "The final report must carry my name. No paragraph is to be removed or softened because it embarrasses House Deverill. Every servant whose statement was taken must hear the correction before the Susam household representatives who heard my authority questioned. Restitution must begin before any personal understanding between us is discussed. At the final presentation, you will not speak for me, interrupt me, or summarize my conclusions before I have given them." The solicitor's brows rose at the fourth condition. Clement's expression did not. "And the fifth?" he asked. "There is no fifth. There was in your letter." Winifred held his gaze. "You are not to attach an offer of employment, patronage, protection, or courtship to my return." The room became very still. Mrs. Vale turned a page in her book. Clement looked down at Winifred's sheet, then at the unsigned memorandum. "You believe I might use affection as a means of obtaining compliance. I believe powerful men often mistake generosity for consent." The words cost him. She saw that. He did not defend himself. "Then the fifth condition will be written plainly." He drew the memorandum closer and added the sentence in his own hand. When he finished, he signed beneath Winifred's name rather than above it. The solicitor witnessed both signatures. Clement placed the ducal seal at the lower margin, leaving her authorship untouched. "There," he said, "your terms govern the inquiry. They govern my part in it." Yes, his correction came without resentment. That, more than the signature, assured her that he had begun to understand. The work resumed that afternoon. The London parcel was opened before witnesses. The salver, sugar basket, and genuine berry spoon were removed one at a time, listed, weighed, and placed on linen. Winifred compared the repaired spoon with the certified wax impression of her father's three-petaled punch. The forms matched. She did not remove the original steel punch from her walnut case until the comparison had been recorded, and even then she displayed it without surrendering possession. The hallmark extract proved that the pseudo-marks copied onto the plated substitutes could not lawfully belong to the dates they imitated. The original assay card was opened from the solicitor's strongbox and set beside the chapel inventory. Its measurements matched the communion cup exactly. The genuine control spoon remained a separate object, recorded under its own weight and repair history. No single piece proved the entire scheme. Together, they formed a pattern too disciplined to dismiss as household confusion. On the 24th May, the household writing room was opened under Clement's authority and the presence of Mrs. Pritchard, the solicitor, and Winifred. Lady Daphne objected from the corridor. "Those are private family instructions." "They concern family property," Clement replied. "That makes them evidence. You are allowing a hired tradeswoman to search my papers." Winifred turned before entering the room. "I am no longer hired, my lady." The truth landed more sharply than any insult. Daphne looked at Clement. "You have brought her back without position." "I have brought her back with authority. She defined herself." The instruction books were found in a locked escritoire, not hidden, merely protected by the confidence that no one would ask the right question. Several entries matched the dates on Hector's invoices. Others carried short phrases in Lady Daphne's hand. Reduce visible loss, preserve the old impression, and make the old service answer twice. The last phrase matched the pawnbroker's ticket exactly. Payment references from the repair allowance aligned with renewed pledges on the recovered parcel. Winifred recorded the convergence without adding motive the records did not yet prove. Clement stood beside her as she read. "You knew this phrase in London," he said, "only from the parcel ticket. And now I know it came from this book." "What does it mean?" Lady Daphne answered from the doorway. "It means using household property efficiently." Clement turned. "By pawning genuine silver and returning plated copies. By managing assets no one would miss. The house had obligations, entertainments, subscriptions, political hospitality. Appearances protect credit." "Whose credit?" he asked. "Ours, no yours." For the first time, Daphne's composure cracked. "Do you imagine this estate survives on moral purity? Guests expect abundance. Tenants expect confidence. Creditors expect display. I preserved the name you inherited." Winifred closed the instruction book. By removing the names of the people whose work made the display possible. Daphne's gaze sharpened. "This is not about your father. It became about my father when his truthful card was used to excuse your false silver." The following morning brought Hector's solicitor's threat. It alleged unlawful seizure of business property, defamation, and interference with legitimate pledges. Clement read it once and handed it to the estate solicitor. Reply that all property remains documented, sealed, and available for lawful examination. Invite Mr. Tolland to attend the final accounting. He may refuse. The solicitor said, then his refusal will be recorded. He has also offered a private settlement, Lady Daphne said. She had entered without invitation, carrying a folded note. The pawned pieces can be redeemed. The contractor can be dismissed quietly. No creditors need know. No county trustees need hear more. Clement did not take the note. No. You would expose your own house? It is already exposed. Only the room is still dark. Daphne's face whitened. And what of me? You will have the same opportunity to answer the records as every other person involved. Before servants, before the people whose obedience made your scheme possible. She left without another word. On the 24th May, Clement gathered the butler, Mrs. Pritchard, Mr. Weller, the solicitor, and the same senior household representatives, who had heard Winifred reduced to a hired copyist. He stood beside the audit table and spoke before she did. I suspended Miss Armitage's attribution while preserving the use of her work. I called that neutrality. It was not. It repeated the injustice under examination by keeping the labor and removing the name. The final report will bear her authorship, and no servant is to repeat or imply otherwise. He did not ask Winifred whether the statement satisfied her. He did not look toward the room for approval. He merely corrected the record and accepted the silence that followed. Later, when they stood alone except for Mrs. Vale at the far window, he asked, "What remains?" Winifred looked across the tables, crowded with separate truths. Bent counterfeit spoon, genuine control spoon, recovered parcel, assay card, hallmark extract, transport tags, porter's book, repair invoices, Lady Daphne's instructions. Each object and record had reached the same conclusion by a different road. Not another drawing room argument, she said. Not a stack of papers passed between gentlemen. What then? The long gallery. Clement waited. Clear it, Winifred continued. Bring in a table long enough for the entire registered service. Every piece in its proper order, every absence left visible, every substitute placed where the genuine object should have stood. Understanding entered his face. A house measured by its gaps. A house made to look at what it removed. Clement inclined his head, when Winifred rested one hand on the closed instruction book, 27 May, and this time, Your Grace, the silver will not be allowed to speak without naming who taught it the truth. On the 27th of May, the long gallery of Linden Grange no longer resembled a room designed for admiration. The portraits remained, the windows still admitted a pale Kent morning, and the gilt frames still declared generations of Deverill confidence. But beneath them ran a single table covered in black serge from one end of the gallery to the other. Upon it lay the registered silver of the house, arranged by service year, room, and function according to Winifred's silhouette sheets. 168 places had been marked where a genuine object was present. Silver occupied the outline. Where one had vanished, the paper remained empty. Where a plated substitute had been found, it rested beside the vacant shape of the sterling piece it had replaced. The effect was more severe than disorder. Disorder could be forgiven. This was absence made visible. County trustees stood near the windows. Senior servants waited together beside Mrs. Pritchard and the butler, Mr. Weller, the retired plate porter, held himself stiffly near the solicitor's table. The independent assayer had come from London with his written statement. Two representatives of affected creditors stood behind him. Lady Daphne sat in a carved chair near the centre of the gallery, dressed in dark violet silk, as though mourning an insult rather than answering one. Hector Tolland had arrived under formal notice and stood beside his solicitor with the composure of a man who believed professional language could still rescue him. Clement remained at the head of the room, but not behind the evidence table. He had promised not to speak before Winifred had finished. He kept that promise. The estate solicitor began by stating that the gathering was an accounting of household property, not a criminal trial. All evidence had been preserved under recorded custody. Any suspected offence would be referred afterward to the proper magistrate and assay authorities. Then he stepped back. Winifred stood at the centre of the long table. She wore no ornament beyond the plain brooch at her collar. Her walnut case rested beside her document folio. This inquiry began with one spoon, she said. It does not end with one spoon. The solicitor brought forward the first sealed box. He displayed the unbroken fastening and his original seal, then opened it before the witnesses. The bent counterfeit berry spoon lay upon the felt exactly as it had since the night of the 5th May. Its stem remained folded sideways. No one had straightened it, polished it, or altered the copied marks. Winifred lifted it on linen and placed it within the paper outline assigned to the missing Deverill spoon. It did not fit. The bowl was slightly narrow. The stem was lighter. The handle ended short of the drawn edge. This piece was found in the Deverill berry service, she said. Its surface is silver plate over composition metal. The stem was filed beneath the decoration. Its marks imitate lawful marks, but the sponsor and date combinations never existed together. The certified hallmark extract was placed beside it. The London assayer confirmed the mismatch in a few precise sentences. He did not speculate about who had made the substitute. He confirmed only that the marks could not be genuine. Next, the solicitor opened the separate container holding Hector's control spoon. It was intact, properly weighted, and marked with the 3-petaled Armitage repair symbol. Winifred placed it in the adjoining outline. It fit. Mr. Tolland presented this as proof that the Deverill service was genuine and that my judgment was distorted by family grievance. In fact, It proves that a registered Deverill spoon remained in his possession, while a plated substitute entered the house. Hector's solicitor rose slightly. My client retained the spoon against an unpaid account. That claim is recorded, Winifred replied. It does not explain why the estate register lacked a lawful notice of retention, why the companion spoon disappeared through the same restoration route, or why plated wares returned under the original service count. Hector's expression did not change, but his hand closed around the head of his cane. Winifred turned to the recovered London parcel. Its seals were inspected and cut. The salver, sugar basket, and second repaired spoon were removed under the custody record. The recovered spoon bore her father's 3-petaled mark and matched the 1848 repair entry. She opened the walnut case herself and held the steel punch where the room could see it. She did not surrender it. The solicitor displayed the certified wax impression created on the 7th May. The shapes agreed. Matthew Armitage repaired both genuine spoons, Winifred said. Neither plated substitute carries his mark. His work left the workshop honest. The fraud occurred afterward. Lady Daphne's voice crossed the gallery. That proves only that old objects changed hands. Houses sell, exchange, and repair plate constantly. Yes, Winifred said. That is why movement matters. The porter's book came next. Mr. Weller identified the changed lead tags, the altered return numbers, and the chest that came back lighter in June 1849. The current butler confirmed that later transfers followed the same route. Hector's invoices carried matching consignment codes. 3 claimed restorations during periods when no corresponding receipt showed plate entering his workshop. 1 code matched the pawnbroker's parcel ticket. A porter's memory after 8 years cannot outweigh business records, Hector said. Winifred looked toward him. It does not need to. The business records agree with him. She placed the transport tags, invoices, porter entries, and parcel ticket in a single line. Each had been week alone. Together, they described repetition. Genuine objects left Linden Grange or Alresford House under restoration labels. Inferior substitutes returned. The genuine pieces were pledged under Hector's contractor code. Renewed payments passed through the household repair allowance controlled by Lady Daphne. Hector spoke more sharply. Temporary pledges were used against unpaid restoration fees. The family benefited from continued service without immediate expense. Then, why were the pledged objects never listed as security? Winifred asked. Why were substitutes entered as originals? Why were the renewed loans credited through Lady Daphne's allowance rather than through your ordinary accounts? Because discretion was required. Discretion for whom? He did not answer. The original assay card was then removed from the estate strongbox. The solicitor confirmed its custody from the night Hector brought it to Linden Grange. The card was genuine. Matthew Armitage's signature was genuine. The measurements were also genuine. Winifred placed the chapel inventory beside it. This document was presented before county witnesses as proof that my father certified the berry spoon. It did not concern a berry spoon. It concerned the chapel communion cup. The assayer confirmed that the recorded weight and dimensions could not describe the spoon. The abbreviation matched the chapel commission. Hector's own evidence had been truthful. The story surrounding it had not. A stir moved through the trustees. Lady Daphne rose. Even if Mr. Tolland allowed the card to be misunderstood, that does not make me part of a theft. Winifred opened the household instruction book. The phrase on the pawnbroker's ticket appeared in Lady Daphne's hand. Make the old service answer twice. Other entries aligned with the consignment dates and allowance payments. Reduce visible loss. Preserve the old impression. Shift the inferior pieces to lesser rooms. Daphne's face hardened. Those were instructions for household economy. Economy does not require false marks, Winifred said, nor does it require servants to believe substituted objects are genuine. You are a hired woman elevating workshop grievances into an attack upon a noble house. Winifred looked across the long table at the empty paper shapes, the false silver, and the genuine pieces recovered from pledge. Then she looked directly at Lady Daphne. Then why did your house keep my labor and remove my name? The question changed the room. It was no longer only about silver. Clement stepped forward, but he did not take Winifred's place. Because I allowed it, he said. Every face turned toward him. I suspended Miss Armitage's attribution while preserving the use of her work. I called that neutrality. It was not. House Deverill benefited from her knowledge and then treated her name as the inconvenient part of the truth. That failure is mine. Lady Daphne stared at him. You would disgrace your own family before servants and creditors. The disgrace was committed before they entered the room. Hector broke in. Your Grace, whatever errors occurred, I acted under Lady Daphne's instructions. My firm merely provided liquidity against underused assets. Daphne turned on him. You selected the pieces. You arranged the false wares. You assured me no one could distinguish them. The admission left her mouth before caution could reclaim it. Hector's solicitor closed his eyes, yet Winifred did not rely upon the quarrel. She returned to the documents. Their disagreement concerns blame. The records establish method. She named each link once and only once: the bent-plated spoon, the genuine control spoon held outside the register, the recovered parcel, the misused assay card, the impossible pseudomarks, the altered transport tags, the porter's testimony, Hector's contractor code, Lady Daphne's instructions, the allowance payments. No confession was necessary. The house had been measured and the gaps had answered. Clement announced the consequences only after Winifred closed her folio. Hector Tolland's Deverill contract ended immediately. The evidence would be delivered to the local magistrate and the relevant assay authority. Civil recovery would begin for pledged goods and proceeds. The estate would repay unpaid wages, contractor losses, and household expenses distorted by the scheme, then seek recovery from those responsible. Lady Daphne's authority over household accounts, staff, invitations, and repair allowances ended that day. Her discretionary social allowance would cease. She would remove to the smaller Deverill residence in Bath, while the financial claims were settled. Trustees and creditors would receive the corrected report. You cannot exile me from my own family, Daphne said. Clement's voice remained quiet. You are not being exiled. You are being denied the power you misused. No applause followed. The satisfaction was deeper than applause and less theatrical. Mr. Weller's pension was confirmed in writing. Mrs. Pritchard received authority to establish dual signatures for all future plate movements. The servants who had spoken were told before the trustees that their positions were secure. The corrected catalogue would name Matthew Armitage as the craftsman who refused to certify false silver, and Winifred Armitage as the person who compiled and authenticated the final record. When the gallery had emptied and the evidence had been resealed, Winifred remained beside the bent spoon in its tray. Clement approached without rank in his posture, though rank still shaped everything the world allowed him to offer. No commission, he said. No condition. He waited until she looked at him. May I call upon you? Winifred did not answer Clement in the empty long gallery until the solicitor had carried the sealed evidence boxes away, and the last servant had closed the door. You may call, she said, but you may not treat courtship as restitution. Clement inclined his head. I won't. You may not purchase forgiveness by repairing what the estate was already obliged to. Repair. I understand, and you may not assume that because I permit you to visit, I have promised you an answer. A faint trace of his old dry humor returned. Miss Armitage, after the past 3 weeks, I should be grateful for permission to ask whether you take tea. He called first at Mrs. Vale's house in Maidstone. Then later, at the London rooms, Winifred leased above a narrow workshop near Holborn. He came at proper hours. He sent no jewels. He paid no tradesman to improve the premises without her consent. When he brought flowers once, Winifred told him the scent interfered with polishing compounds. And he arrived the following week with a box of plain pencils instead. By September, 4 months of courtship had passed through letters, supervised visits, shared meals, and long conversations in which Clement learned that listening was not the pause before authority. During those months, Winifred rebuilt the Armitage workshop with the full audit fee, commissions secured through her authenticated catalogue, and family tools recovered from storage. The walnut case rested beside the bench. Her father's worn steel repair punch remained inside it, no longer the last object of a ruined trade, but the first object in a restored one. Clement became her client only after asking for her published rates. He commissioned a replacement berry spoon for the Deverill service and signed the order like any other patron. The design belonged to the workshop. The price was not reduced because he was a duke or increased because he loved the maker. Winifred accepted the commission only after the marriage settlement had been drafted. Separately from it, the settlement placed the workshop income in trust for her own use, preserved her authority to sign catalogues and accept commissions, and denied House Deverill any claim over her designs. The solicitor read every clause aloud in Mrs. Vale's presence. Clement requested only one addition. If Miss Armitage chooses to close the workshop, expand it, or appoint another manager, the decision is hers. Winifred looked across the table. You have finally learned not to improve my terms for me. I'm attempting to improve my conduct instead. On a cool afternoon late in September, he came to the workshop while Mrs. Vale sorted correspondence in the adjoining room. Winifred was examining the unfinished replacement spoon beneath the window. Its bowl had been raised, its stem strengthened, and its pattern drawn from the genuine Deverill pieces rather than the plated copy. It carried no mark yet. Clement removed his gloves and placed them on the visitor's chair. May I see it? You may look. You may not touch until the surface is finished. A severe courtship. A protected commission. He stood beside the bench without crowding her. The months had changed him in ways no public apology could have achieved. He no longer entered a room, assuming that love granted access. He asked. He waited. When Winifred disagreed, he did not retreat into irony or invoke responsibility as a disguise for control. He had not become less powerful. He had become more careful with power. The settlement is ready, he said. The audit repayments have begun. Mr. Weller's pension has been secured independently of estate favour. Mrs. Pritchard now requires 2 signatures for every plate transfer. The corrected catalogue goes to print next week. I know. My name is on the proofs. It should have been there from the beginning. Winifred set down the burnisher. Yes. He accepted the word without asking her to soften it. Then he reached into his coat, not for a ring, but for a folded sheet. This is not a commission, a contract, or an apology. That leaves very little paper in your life. I've discovered paper is safest when its purpose is declared. He placed the sheet before her. It was a brief statement in his own hand. It said that any marriage between them would not alter Winifred's professional name, ownership of the workshop, right to publish, or freedom to refuse Deverill commissions. Beneath it, he had written one sentence without legal formality. I ask for your life beside mine, not beneath it. Winifred read the words twice. Clement did not speak until she looked up. I love you, he said, not because you saved my house from disgrace, not because you are clever enough to read what others overlook. I love the way you refuse certainty when evidence has not earned it. I love that you protect people without making them indebted to you. I love that you left me when staying would have cost your name. Will you marry me? Mrs. Vale's papers rustled faintly in the adjoining room. The ordinary sound steadied Winifred more than ceremony could have done. She looked at the unfinished spoon, the walnut case, and the man who had once believed anonymity could protect truth. Yes, she said. Clement closed his eyes for one brief second. When he opened them, relief had stripped the Duke from his face. He reached for her hand, then stopped. May I? Winifred gave it to him. They married by banns in their parish church in October, without a ballroom, a political spectacle, or an audience assembled to applaud redemption. On the 2nd of November, Winifred Deverill, Duchess of Arlesford, sat at a small breakfast table inside the Armitage workshop, while morning light touched rows of tools her father would have recognized. Her marriage had changed her title. It had not erased her working name. The corrected Deverill catalogue had been issued with the line compiled and authenticated by Winifred Armitage beneath the title page. An appendix credited Mrs. Pritchard, Mr. Weller, the butler, and every servant whose testimony had established movement and custody. At Linden Grange, the bent counterfeit spoon remained permanently curved inside a glass-fronted audit cabinet. It had not been repaired or polished into innocence. The genuine control spoon and the recovered pieces had returned to the authenticated plate chest after legal release. Hector Tolland had been convicted at the autumn quarter sessions on fraud-related charges and offences involving false trade practices. Civil recovery had restored most of the pledged Deverill plate and redirected the remaining proceeds toward those who had suffered losses. Lady Daphne lived at the smaller family residence in Bath. Her household authority was gone. Her discretionary allowance remained suspended, and the invitations that once followed her name no longer arrived with the same obedience. Clement entered the workshop carrying a covered dish from the breakfast room. Mrs. Vale says you've worked since dawn. Mrs. Vale believes dawn is an illness. She may be correct. He set the dish down and uncovered a preserved pear. Beside it lay the newly finished berry spoon. It was not the bent counterfeit spoon. It was not Hector's control spoon. It was a new piece made for House Deverill under an ordinary commission and paid for at the published rate. Near the handle, clear beneath the light, stood the registered sponsor's mark, W.A. Winifred lifted the spoon. Clement watched without tension. Though both remembered another table and another pear, the fruit settled into the bowl. The stem held firm. "Adequate?" he asked. Winifred weighed the spoon in her hand, then looked at the mark carrying her name into the future. "Honest," she said. Morning light moved across the silver. And this time Nothing bent beneath the weight of the truth.